What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Ahsoka Season 1. Yes, the first season of Ahsoka, the Star Wars series on Disney Plus, has concluded after 8 episodes. And yeah, I really liked Ahsoka a lot. I think there's a lot to get into, and I think it's very interesting to think about Ahsoka because I think your enjoyment of Ahsoka largely will hinge on to what degree of Star Wars fan you have been with the television shows, namely the previous Dave Filoni properties. The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, of course, people know Clone Wars, where Ahsoka Tano, the character, came from. There are beats, there are references, there are odds and ends through this Ahsoka Season 1 that will not land or not land as strongly as they should if you are not a viewer, watcher of Clone Wars and Rebels. I think that's a very interesting place for Star Wars storytelling to be in. Although if you think about where we've been, with Star Wars TV in the last, 2 years or so, right? I think we've kind of been serving a handful of masters. You kind of have the down the middle for everyone Star Wars series with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. You have kind of a nod to the prequel fans, but still kind of for everyone with Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have obviously amazing storytelling, absolutely excellent TV making for the heads type thing with Andor. And on the other side of the coin, for the animated show heads, you have Ahsoka. We're kind of serving an interesting Venn diagram with all of these shows, and we'll see where Skeleton Crew fits in. That'll be our next Star Wars series sometime next year. But Ahsoka, I think, is coming in an interesting place. It's definitely a lot more satisfying to the hardcore, prequel slash animated show fan than I think Obi-Wan was, right? You can check my review on Obi-Wan, of course. I think Ahsoka overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it was really effective at how much plot it accomplished with its first season. And I think it's increasingly clear that the Star Wars storytelling apparatus on Disney Plus is building up to the previously announced at Celebration Dave Filoni movie that they said will be concluding the quote Mandoverse. So I think it seems pretty obvious that the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and I guess anything else, Book of Boba Fett perhaps, Skeleton Crew perhaps, Ahsoka and Mandalorian are going to conclude with the Filoni movie. And I assume there's no reason to expect anything else. That is where Grand Admiral Thrawn will be defeated in that movie. So Ahsoka Season 1 was largely set out to do what? Establish Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action, bringing back Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced him on Rebels. They did a great job. The fact that the voice is identical, I think, really works, honestly, in making it feel like it's him. What else we had to do? We had to establish Ezra Bridger in live action. Took us a while to get to Ezra, of course, but that was done. And Thrawn had to, and Ezra as well, but really Thrawn had to leave the unknown regions where he was whisked away to at the end of Rebels from the Purgles. Thrawn had to get back to the main Star Wars galaxy so his, threat to the New Republic could begin in earnest. And that's what happened in this season. So I think from a timeline plot perspective, plotting out what's going to happen with the rest of Mandalorian and Ahsoka leading up to the Filoni movie, mission accomplished. Now, there were some other cool things that happened in Ahsoka that I wasn't quite expecting. I think for starters, obviously introducing Sabine Wren to live action, another big plus, right? We got Hera as well. Hera definitely kind of off to the side, but I think it makes sense for what kind of character Hera is. And for this, and of course we got so much great Hera in Rebels, so I think it's fine. Sabine, we learned, I think, a key piece of information here, which is that Sabine was a a kind of, quote, failed Padawan to Ahsoka off screen, in between bits of the story, in between the end of Rebels and the beginning of Ahsoka the series. Very interesting, right? I think Ho Yang, who obviously makes an appearance in live action, David Tennant did a great job voicing him through the whole run. Ho Yang makes, I think, a really interesting note, saying that Sabine has displayed some of the worst aptitude for being a Jedi he's ever seen. Sabine has really no connection to the Force throughout the series. That changes by the end. This is actually, if you think about it, really radical form of Star Wars storytelling, and really in sync with the Last Jedi point of view about how anyone could be a Jedi. That was what Ahsoka brought to her point of view when it came to deciding to train Sabine, someone who she had known long before that actually happened in the storytelling. And I think that's kind of an underrated element to this, where Sabine, through hard work and grinding, was able to start her journey as a fledgling, Padawan learner, which is not actually incongruous with previous George Lucas comments about how the Force functions way back in the day, but it's interesting to see this applied once again to characters we actually know. The other really interesting and unexpected thing in Ahsoka, from the storytelling perspective, would be, of course, everything we got going on with Baylan Skoll and his Padawan Shin. Baylan, of course, played by the now late Ray Stevenson. We knew he was in there. Dark Jedi, knew Order 66 Survivor, etc. Cool. Ray Stevenson, great presence as an actor, as a bad guy. But what I wasn't quite expecting was that very quickly it became clear that Baylan was a bit more gray. He had a lot of interesting thoughts. It seemed definitely a thoughtful character, even if he played his cards close to his vest. And like serving Thrawn, helping release Thrawn back on the galaxy was more of a means to an end for him. And that was definitely tantalizing, right? He's much more than just kind of a bad guy, a heavy. And that was quite appealing. And of course, what happens in the finale, and before the finale, where Baylan kind of goes rogue and like leaves Thrawn behind, releases Shin from his, master-apprentice relationship, and Baylan just kind of goes off, and we see just one shot in the finale. And what is Baylan doing? He's on a mountaintop carved like the Mortis gods on Peridia. And it's like, yep, here we go. Because if you are a Clone Wars and Rebels fan, you're a lore head like that. That is what we were waiting for. That was what we were watching for. Wasn't sure how that was going to manifest. But the application of Mortis, we knew was going to be around in some way. And of course, I'm going to get to episode 5 in a bit, where we return to the world between worlds. The Filoni lore shit, you knew he was going to put that in there. And to me, that is the most intriguing part of the storytelling. That there is what's going on with that, we don't know. But that's what's so fascinating. Of course, episode 5, Ahsoka somehow getting back into the world between worlds and encountering Anakin, Hayden Christensen reprising the role once again, and kind of going through a series of flashback trials where young Ahsoka is played by Ariana Greenblatt. We see Captain Rex briefly in live action. All of that, and the way that was filmed with Anakin and Vader being visually clipped in and out, very interesting. I think all that stuff. I'm very curious, the final fate of Ahsoka, because that Dave Filoni loves this shit so much, right? I think it was pretty easy to predict that Ahsoka would probably be the one to be left behind on Peridia. Obviously, Thrawn had to escape. We knew that would happen. I wasn't quite sure where the other, cards would lay. Sabine getting stranded as well. Didn't necessarily see that one coming. But I guess it makes sense given her progression in this episode, in the finale, with the Force. Ezra getting back to the galaxy, the main galaxy alone. Interesting. But now it's quite clear that the world between worlds, the Mortis stuff, Baylan and Ahsoka, that piece is how they would return. Now, of course, what's so unfortunately very sad and, of course, frustrating from a storytelling angle is Ray Stevenson kind of tragically, unexpectedly passed away in the summer, so he cannot reprise the role of Baylan Skoll. And I'm very curious if they would consider recasting the character, or, I feel like you have to acknowledge it in some way, because I'm sure that him and Ahsoka were going to converge once again, if one of them was to eventually escape, who knows? Um, Obviously, Balin wasn't necessarily trying to escape. He was trying to seek something along the lines with Mortis and, this other plane with the Force. It's really unclear, but it's tantalizing. So a lot of fun theorizing to come with that. In general, finding out that the planet that Thrawn got brought to at the end of Rebels, this new planet Peridia, which in turn was the ancient homeworld of the Dathomiri Night Sisters, and Morgan Elsbeth, we learned early in the season, is actually, in fact, a Night Sister herself. That was some fun, interesting lore notes, I'd have to say. Elsbeth and Ahsoka's duel in the finale. Shout out the Blade of Talzin, nice Easter egg there. That was a fun duel. I think that was really well done. That wide shot when they're fighting each other looked really awesome. I think, like I said, I think from a plot perspective, it really accomplished all its notes. And then the unexpected stuff of Balin being a much more interesting character than you would have expected. Sabine having a Padawan relationship with Ahsoka. Those things really stood out to me. I love the performance of adult Ezra. I thought that was kind of note perfect. Shin, also an intriguing character. She was, a few words throughout the season, but interesting. Of course, still on the board there. Episode 5, have to say once again, really, I think really special, but again, kind of speaks to, like, if you didn't watch Ezra pull Ahsoka into the world between worlds and save Ahsoka from death at Darth Vader's hand in Rebels, of course, that doesn't mean as much to you when you see it. And I think that's just kind of the unfortunate reality when, these shows are not all made for the same audience. I think that's okay. We can live in a world where Ahsoka is awesome and Andor is awesome, and they're different and awesome for very different reasons. I have a feeling Skeleton Crew and the Acolyte will have a similar vibe as well in terms of feeling a little different, a little interesting, But overall, I think it's effective first season. I'm very curious, like, what the cadence now is from here. Ahsoka season 2 versus the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew coming up next. How close is Mandalorian season 4? It's all quite unclear. How close is that Filoni movie? In a sense, I think it would make sense for the Filoni movie to be the first new Star Wars movie to come out. It seems like the post Rise of Skywalker Rey continuation movie is the closer one. Of course, all that is subject to change, as we know with Star Wars storytelling in the movies. It's not really worth thinking too much about until things get more concrete and stuff starts getting filmed. So we'll leave it there. It was really fun seeing the Purgles in live action. Of course, they were referenced in Mandalorian, shown briefly. Literally watching Ho-Yang and Ahsoka use a Purgle to hyperspace jump, pretty cool. I am pretty satisfied with Ahsoka. I have to say, I'm someone who found things to like about Obi-Wan, even if the storytelling itself was pretty underwhelming. But I think Ahsoka is effective, but I think a lot of this is kind of like pause. Like, this is a really effective, like, season ending point, but also there's so much to this story that is yet to be accomplished, whereas Obi-Wan was much more open and closed type approach. So, in a sense, bit of an incomplete, it's hard to really fully evaluate Ahsoka season 1 until we see the conclusion of the Ahsoka storytelling, assumingly in the Filoni movie. So, long time to wait on that front. But yeah, shout out Dave Filoni, man. He is the most consistent force in Star Wars storytelling. Again, Tony Gilroy, not a dedicated person in Star Wars, but it's interesting, right? Tony Gilroy, someone who doesn't even have reverence for Star Wars, so he just approaches it with an amazing eye for writing and whatnot. And Filoni is so in that lore bag and so hardcore. It's really cool that we have two different things like that. So yeah, shout out Hayden Christensen. It's always fun to see him coming back. I thought he did a really nice job. Especially in episode 5, he did very different versions of Anakin. Wearing the Clone Wars era armor in parts of it. So that's always fun to me. God, there's so much tantalizing stuff with Ahsoka and Balin and Peridea and the World Between Worlds. We saw the owl reference in the finale here. Yeah, so pretty awesome. Shout out Ahsoka, shout out Filoni, shout out Rosario Dawson. I thought she did a really nice job as Ahsoka. We, of course, had seen her doing it already. Natasha Liu Bordizzo as Sabine, I thought, did a nice job as well. Lars Mikkelsen, great presence as Thrawn. I loved his henchman, Enoch, with the cool helmet visor, kind of all of Thrawn's crew on the Chimera with like their effed up armor with the like, Kitsurgi, Japanese technique to melt armor and whatnot. All that was like really cool from a visual perspective. The way they chanted Thrawn's name. I think Thrawn as a character, who of course is famous for decades, now non-canon and canon alike. Thrawn, I think, is a really cool movie villain because we're gonna get so much build up to him from just Ahsoka if you're new to this, but of course all the animated for Rebels as well if you're more hardcore, and if you're even older, of course, the old books. So it's actually like a Star Wars like story that I feel like there's like real momentum on the movie front, especially because we know Mandalorian will be involved, so there'll be so much audience investment with Din and Grogu in there as well, you have to assume. So it's exciting. I think this is a really good first step in really pushing that forward in terms of like a cohesive storytelling approach to this era, the Mandoverse era of Star Wars storytelling, and it'll be fun to continue on the ride. But let me know, how did you feel about Ahsoka Season 1? Are you geeking on the Balin ender, the Balin mountaintop shot like me? And for more Star Wars reviews, more movie reviews, TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.